Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Don't Fall for the Dirty Dozen Tax Scams, Scam Avoidance and Recovery. I see that it is the top of the hour. We're glad that you all have joined us today. My name is Anika Pompey, and I am a Senior Stakeholder Liaison with the Internal Revenue Service. I will be your moderator for today's webinar, which is slated for approximately 75 minutes. This webinar offers one IRS continuing education credit. Participants earn one IRS CE credit and a related certificate of completion by attending the live broadcast of the webinar for at least 50 minutes after the official top of the hour start time, and answering at least 3 polling questions during the live broadcast. The polling question example to test your pop-up blocker will count as an attendance check towards the polling question response requirement. Before we begin, if there is anyone in the media that is with if there is anyone in the audience that is with the media, please send an email to the address on the slide. Be sure to include your contact information and the news publication you're with. Our media relations and stakeholder liaison staff will assist you and answer any questions you may have. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded for future postings. Please note, continuing education credit or certificates of completion are not offered if you view any version of our webinars after the live broadcast. Now, we hope that you won't experience any technology issues, but if you do, this slide shows helpful tips and reminders. We've posted a technical help document you can download from the materials section on the left side of your screen. It provides the minimum system requirements for viewing this webinar, along with some best practices and quick solutions. If you've completed and passed your system check and are still having problems, try one of the following. First, you can close the screen where you're viewing the webinar and relaunch it, or you can click on Settings on your browser viewing screen and select HLS. Now, you have received today's PowerPoint in a reminder email, but if not, no worries. You can download it by clicking on the Materials drop-down arrow on the left side of your screen, as shown on this slide. To receive our survey at the end of the presentation, you need to have your pop-up blocker disabled. We've also included several technical documents that describe how you can allow pop-up blockers based on the browser you're using on the Materials tab. Closed captioning is available for today's presentation. If you're having trouble hearing the audio through your computer speakers, please click the Closed Captioning drop-down arrow located on the left side of your screen. This feature will be available throughout the webinar. Now, if you have a topic-specific question today, we would like you to submit that to us by clicking the Ask Question drop-down arrow to reveal the text box. Type your question in the text box and click Send, but this is very important. Please do not enter any sensitive or taxpayer-specific information. Now, during the presentation, we'll take a few breaks to check in and engage with you. At those times, a polling style feature will pop up on your screen with a question and multiple choice answers. Select the response you believe is correct by clicking on the radio button next to your selection and click Submit. If you do not get the polling question, this may be because you have your pop-up blocker on. So please take a moment to disable your pop-up blocker now so that you can answer the question. We've included several technical documents that describe how you can disable pop-up blockers based on the browser you are using. We have documents for Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, as well as Safari for Mac. You can access them by clicking on the Materials drop-down arrow on the left side of your screen. All right, so really quickly, what we're going to do is take some time and test the polling feature. So here's your opportunity to ensure that your pop-up blocker is not on so you can receive the remaining polling questions throughout today's presentation. Now, audience, this example polling question will count towards the polling question requirements to earn CE credit. So here's your question. Do you know who your local stakeholder liaison is? Answer A for yes, B for no, or C, what is a stakeholder liaison? Take a moment and click the radio button that corresponds to your answer, and I'm going to read that again for you. Do you know who your local stakeholder liaison is? Answer A for yes, B for no, or C, what is stakeholder liaison? I'll give you guys a few more seconds to make your selections. All right, so we are going to stop polling now. So let's see how the majority of you all responded. I see the majority of you respond, 55% of you chose B, no. We hope that you received the polling question and were able to submit your answer. If not, now's the time to check your pop-up blocker to make sure you have it turned off. So again, we've included several technical documents that describe how you can disable pop-up blockers based on the browser you are using. Just click on the Materials drop-down arrow on the left side of your screen to download your browser document. Again, we welcome you all. Before we move along with our session, let me make sure you guys are in the right place. So today's webinar is Don't Fall for the Dirty Dozen Tax Scams, Scam Avoidance and Recovery. This webinar is scheduled for approximately 75 minutes from the top of the hour. Now, let me introduce to you all today's speakers. We are joined by Jeffrey Latisa and Krista Sullivan with the Internal Revenue Service. Jeff works for the IRS in the Communication and Liaison Division as a stakeholder liaison in Lowell, Massachusetts. Jeffrey joined the IRS in 2008. Prior to joining the Communication and Liaison Division, he worked as a lead case advocate with the Taxpayer Advocate Service and in identity theft victim assistance. He has a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst and a Juris Doctor from the University of Connecticut School of Law. Krista, who also works in Communication and Liaison Division as a senior tax analyst, has been with the Internal Revenue Service since 2009. Prior to joining the IRS, she worked in large private sector banks and accounting firms and held a C Certified Financial Planner designation, CFP. She previously served as a field collection revenue officer and group manager before coming to Communication and Liaison, stakeholder liaison. In her current role, she manages relationships with large national tax practitioner organizations. Let's give a warm welcome for Jeff and Krista. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jeff to begin the presentation. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anika. Hello, everyone, and thanks for attending today's webinar. So let's get started. Today, we are going to review the IRS Dirty Dozen tax scams. We are going to learn what taxpayers should do if they're a victim of a tax scam. And we're going to take an in-depth look at the Identity Protection PTIN program and explore why taxpayers should enroll in the program. Each year, the IRS compiles the Dirty Dozen list. It includes a variety of common scams that taxpayers may encounter at any time, but many of these schemes peak during filing season as people prepare their returns or hire someone to help with their taxes. The IRS's annual Dirty Dozen campaign lists 12 scams and schemes that put taxpayers, businesses, and the tax professional community at risk of losing money, personal information, data, and more. The Dirty Dozen represents the worst of the worst tax scams. While the Dirty Dozen is not a legal document or a formal listing of agency enforcement priorities, the education effort is designed to raise awareness and protect taxpayers and tax pros from common tax scams and schemes. I'll provide an overview of some of the more common scams you may encounter. This is the first of the Dirty Dozen for 2025. Taxpayers and tax professionals should be alert to fake communications from entities posing as legitimate organizations in the tax and financial community, including the IRS, state tax agencies, and tax software companies. These messages arrive in the form of unsolicited texts or emails to lure unsuspecting victims into providing valuable personal and financial information that can lead to identity theft. And there are two main types. There's phishing, which is an email sent by fraudsters claiming to come from the IRS. The email lures the victims into the scam with a variety of ruses, such as enticing victims with a phony tax refund or threatening them with false legal or criminal charges for tax fraud. Smishing is a text or smartphone SMS message where scammers often use alarming language such as, "Your account has now been put on hold," or "Unusual activity report," with a bogus solutions link to restore the recipient's account. The promise of unexpected tax refunds is another potential tactic used by the scam artists. Never click on any unsolicited communication claiming to be from the IRS, as it may surreptitiously load malware. This may be a way for malicious hackers to load ransomware that keeps the legitimate user from accessing their system and files. The IRS has special information on irs.gov to help people understand and report email scams. We'll cover this later. Next is bad advice people find online. Incorrect tax information on social media can mislead honest taxpayers with bad advice, potentially leading to identity theft and other tax problems. Social media platforms routinely have inaccurate or misleading tax information, including on TikTok, where people share wildly inaccurate tax advice. Some involve urging people to misuse common tax documents, like Forms W-2. The IRS and CAST, or the CASST, the Coalition Against Scam and Scheme Threats, warn people not to fall for these scams. CASST was launched in 2024 by the tax community following a surge in social media-fueled scams. Instead of following tax information from strangers, we urge taxpayers to follow trusted social media advice from the IRS, tax professionals, and other reputable sources. Taxpayers who knowingly file fraudulent tax returns could potentially face significant civil and criminal penalties. This is the third of the dirty dozen. Swindlers can pose as a helpful third party and offer to help create a taxpayer's IRS individual online account at irs.gov. In reality, no help is needed, and the agency already offers tips on how to sign up and avoid scams. The IRS individual online account provides taxpayers with valuable personal tax information, but watch out, third parties making these offers will try to steal a taxpayer's personal information and try to submit fraudulent tax returns in the victim's names to get a refund. Note, trusted tax professionals might be able to help taxpayers with their online account, but the taxpayers should keep their passwords secure. Bogus charities are always a problem, but they intensify whenever a crisis or a natural disaster strikes. Scammers set up fake organizations to take advantage of the public's generosity. They seek money and personal information, which can be used to further exploit victims through identity theft. Taxpayers who give money or goods to a charity might be able to claim a deduction on their federal tax return if they itemize deductions, but charitable donations only count if they go to a qualified tax-exempt organization that's recognized by the IRS. The fifth of the dirty dozen is related to the fuel tax credit. Many taxpayers were misled into believing they were eligible for the fuel tax credit. The credit is meant for off-highway business and farming use and is not available to most taxpayers. However, unscrupulous tax return preparers and promoters, including people on social media, continue enticing taxpayers into inflating their refunds by erroneously claiming the credit. There's been an increase in the promotion of filing certain refundable credits using Form 4136, credit for federal tax paid on fuels. Taxpayers who might qualify should check irs.gov for more information and ensure that they're properly claiming this credit. We're now at the halfway point of the dirty dozen. Some taxpayers are misinformed about the credits for sick leave and family leave. This specialized credit is available for self-employed individuals for 2020 and 2021 during the pandemic. the credit is not available for later tax years. The IRS is seeing repeated instances where taxpayers are using Form 7202, credits for sick leave and family leave for certain self-employed individuals, to incorrectly claim a credit based on income earned as an employee and not as a self-employed individual. I've been covering tax credits that exist but are claimed incorrectly. Now let's talk about a tax credit that doesn't exist. Social media advice circulates about a non-existent self-employment tax credit that's misleading taxpayers into filing false claims. Promoters market it as a way for self-employed people and gig workers to get big payments for the COVID-19 pandemic period. The inaccurate information being circulated suggests many people qualify for the tax credit and payments of up to $32,000 when they actually do not. In reality, the underlying credit being referred to in social media is not called the self-employment tax credit. It's a much more limited and technical credit called the credits for sick leave and family leave, which I covered on the previous slide. Many people simply do not qualify for these credits, and the IRS is closely reviewing claims coming in under this provision, so taxpayers filing claims do so at their own risk. Okay, so before we move on, I think now would be a good time to check in with our attendees with a polling question.
Jeff, I think that is a great idea. So audience, it is time for our first polling question. Take a moment and click the radio button that best answers the question. Which of these is not a real tax credit? A, credit for sick leave for certain self-employed individuals. B, credit for family leave for certain self-employed individuals. C, self-employment tax credit. Or D, fuel tax credit. If you do not receive the polling question, please enter only the letters A, B, C, or D that corresponds with your response in the Ask Question text box. Your response is time-stamped. Please remember that you need to answer at least 3 polling questions and participate in the live broadcast from the official start time for at least 50 minutes to earn 1 IRS CE credit. The polling question example we did at the beginning of this presentation does count towards the requirement. I'll give you a few more seconds to make your selection and or submit your answer in the Ask Question feature. All right, so we are going to stop polling now, and let's share the correct answer on the next slide. And the correct response is C, self-employment tax credit. I see that 89% of you responded correctly. That is a great response right there. So we'll go ahead and move on because it seems like you all are paying attention. So Krista, I believe it's your turn to have the floor. The mic is yours.
Thanks, Anika. Continuing on with our list, the 8th of our Dirty Dozen tax scams involves taxpayers improperly claiming household employment taxes. Taxpayers invent fictional household employees. Then they file Schedule H on Form 1040, household employment taxes, to claim a refund based on false sick and family medical leave wages they never paid. The overstated withholding scheme is another scam circulating on social media. It encourages people to fill out Form W-2, wage and tax statement, or other forms like Form 1099 NEC and other 1099s with false income and withholding information. In this overstated withholding scheme, scam artists suggest people make up large income and withholding amounts, as well as the fictional employer supplying those amounts. Scam artists then instruct people to file the bogus tax return electronically in hopes of getting a substantial refund due to the large amount of fraudulent withholding. If the IRS cannot verify the wages, income, or withholding credits entered on the tax return, the tax refund will be held pending further review. Taxpayers should always file a complete and accurate tax return. They should only use legitimate information returns, such as an employer-issued Form W-2, to complete returns correctly. There are multiple variations of the overstated withholding credit scheme, including those involving Forms W-2 and W-2G, Forms 1099-R, 1099-NEC, 1099-DIV, 1099-OID, and 1099-B, the Alaskan Dividend Fund, Schedule K-1 with withholding reported, and unspecified source of withholding credit claimed. The Offers in Compromise, or OIC program, is an important program that helps people settle their federal tax debts when they are unable to pay in full. But mills can aggressively promote offers in compromise in misleading ways to people who clearly don't meet the qualifications, frequently costing taxpayers thousands of dollars. A taxpayer can check their eligibility for free using the IRS Offer in Compromise Pre-Qualifier tool. Nearing the end of our list now, let's talk about what we call ghost tax return preparers. Most tax preparers provide outstanding and professional service. However, people should be careful of shady tax professionals and watch for common warning signs, including preparers who charge a fee based on the size of the refund. A major red flag or bad sign is when the tax preparer is unwilling to sign the return. Avoid these ghost preparers who will prepare a tax return but refuse to sign or include their IRS Preparer Tax Identification Number, or PTIN, as required by law. Taxpayers should never sign a blank or incomplete return. Instead, the IRS reminds taxpayers to turn to a trusted tax professional for help. You can find a directory of federal tax return preparers with credentials and select qualifications on irs.gov. We're now to our final of the Dirty Dozen tax scams. The IRS continues to see the new client scam, which involves spear phishing attempts that target tax pros. Cybercriminals impersonate new potential clients to trick tax professionals and other businesses into responding to their emails. Once the tax pro responds, the scammer sends a malicious attachment, or URL, that can compromise the preparer's computer systems and allow the attacker to access sensitive client information. As we discussed earlier, phishing is a term given to emails or text messages designed to get users to provide personal information. Spear phishing is a phishing attempt tailored to a specific organization or business. Tax professionals frequently find themselves a target of this type of scam. Spear phishing holds greater potential for harm because a successful spear phishing attack can ultimately steal client data and the tax pro's identity, allowing the thief to file fraudulent returns using the stolen information. Businesses and individuals, including tax pros, should always be cautious and look out for any suspicious requests or unusual behavior before sharing any sensitive information or responding to an email. Warning signs include poorly constructed sentences and unusual word choices. Be aware that by gaining access to a hacked email account, scammers can locate a genuine email from a previous victim's email account sent to their tax professional. We've been through 12 schemes, so this is our baker's dozen slide. Beyond the Dirty Dozen, there are a wide array of other abusive schemes and bogus tax avoidance strategies that can mislead well-intentioned taxpayers. These can involve different types of trusts, offshore schemes, and even individual retirement arrangements. More information on past schemes is available on the special Dirty Dozen section on irs.gov. Now let's look at some actual examples of scam messages. First, this is a scam that targets individuals typically in HR and accounting. The phishing email requests W-2s for the entire company. The phishing emails typically do not include a lot of information often consisting of a single sentence or a few sentences. Requests for this type of information should be vetted through more than one individual at the company, especially requests for all of the employee's personal and/or financial information. The sender here was likely a victim of an email account compromise, or EAC. In recent months, the W-2 spear phishing emails have become more elaborate, with a fake email thread between someone else in the company and the IRS. This is likely done to make the HR employee think that the request is genuine when it's not. Businesses should be aware that this scam is still an issue and that threat actors have made attempts to improve the phishing email or lure to make the request seem more believable. This is a new client email that a tax professional received. This is a common scam that we see that targets tax professionals. The IRS has been seeing this scam since 2017, and we've had various press releases about it. For more information, you can enter the words "new client" in the search box on irs.gov to find a link to a recent news release on this subject. If a tax professional replies to this email, they will typically receive a second email that will provide a malicious attachment or malicious URL that will download a commodity remote access Trojan, or RAT, to their computer. It is important to be aware of this ongoing scam to prevent downloading malicious files that could infect your computer. Successful new client scams have led to data breaches, where client information was stolen and used to conduct stolen identity refund fraud. This is the email that the tax professional received after responding to the initial email. The URL downloaded a malicious file. The left side of the slide shows the original SMS or text message, also known as a SMISH. On the right side of the slide is the final landing page, which is a fraudulent domain. If someone who received the SMS text message then clicked on the URL, they would see this sign in to ID.me page. Individuals who clicked the phishing URL, who entered their credentials, which would be their email address and/or password, could then have their email account compromised. A compromised email account can be used to send phishing emails, but it could also be used by the threat actor to conduct identity theft. This is why it's important to use two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So even if a threat actor gains access to your email credentials, that your 2FA or MFA would prevent them from accessing your account, because only you would have possession of that authentication mechanism. Here's our final example. This slide shows a recent campaign that used non-IRS accounts to send a phishing email that contained a URL shortener or a fraudulent domain. The link was a URL shortener that redirected to a fraudulent domain. The email addresses were reported to the email service provider, the URL shortener to the appropriate URL shortening service provider, and the fraudulent domain was reported to the appropriate registrar. As part of the Dirty Dozen awareness effort, the IRS encourages people to report individuals who promote improper and abusive tax schemes, as well as tax return preparers who deliberately prepare improper returns. The IRS created the Office of Fraud Enforcement and Office of Promoter Investigations to coordinate service-wide enforcement activities against taxpayers committing tax fraud and promoters marketing and selling abusive tax avoidance transactions and schemes to effectuate tax evasion. To report an abusive tax scheme or a tax return preparer, submit Form 14242, which is titled Reports Suspected Abusive Tax Promotions or Preparers, and any supporting materials online, by mail, or by fax to the IRS Lead Development Center in the Office of Promoter Investigations. Taxpayers and tax practitioners may also send information to the IRS Whistleblower Office for a possible monetary award. If a taxpayer thinks they lost money or personal information to a scammer, they should take steps to limit damage and protect themselves from further loss. We'll cover these steps over the next few slides. First, the taxpayer should protect their finances. They should immediately cut off contact with the scammer to avoid any further manipulation and theft. This includes being extra careful about sending money or sharing personal information with anyone who might contact them. The scammer or their associates might try new ways to coax money and personal data from the taxpayer now that they've identified a victim. The taxpayer should contact their financial institutions to alert them about the scam, since the scammer may try to access the taxpayer's accounts. Next, the taxpayer should stop the scammer from filing any fraudulent federal tax returns using their stolen information. The taxpayer can get an Identity Protection PIN or IP PIN on irs.gov. And we'll cover more about IP PINs more thoroughly in a moment. As we mentioned earlier, taxpayers should also set up an IRS tax account on irs.gov. Accounts are available for individuals, businesses, and tax professionals. Their account is securely protected with multi-factor authentication. Nobody can view their account unless the taxpayer authorizes them. The taxpayer can monitor their tax account activity anytime. All tax professionals should encourage all their clients to get an IP PIN. If the taxpayer believes their Social Security number or ITIN was stolen, they should report it to identitytheft.gov, which is a website operated by the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. They should also notify the IRS by submitting Form 14039, Identity Theft Affidavit. Form 14039 can be submitted online or via mail. There is a separate Form 14039-B, which is called the Business Identity Theft Affidavit for businesses. They should also notify their state tax agency if it's appropriate. In addition, if they received a Form 1099-G for unemployment benefits they didn't file for, the taxpayer should report it to their state agency contact and ask for a corrected Form 1099-G. We've shared a lot of information, so let's pause here and do another polling question.
Thanks, Krista. So, audience, it is time for another polling question, so here we go. A taxpayer should report the loss of their Social Security number or ITIN to A, their state tax agency, if applicable, B, the Internal Revenue Service, C, the Federal Trade Commission, or D, all of the above. Now you all take a moment and click the radio button that best answers the question. If you do not receive the polling question, please enter only the letter A, B, C, or D that corresponds with your response in the Ask Question text box. Your response is timestamped. I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds to make your selection and or submit your answer in the Ask Question feature. All right, so we are going to stop the polling now. So let's share the correct answer on the next slide. And the correct response is D, all of the above. I see that 87% of you have responded correctly. You guys are really on fire today. So great job. Jeff, I think the audience is ready to continue.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about IP PINs now. So we'll start by explaining what an IP PIN is. An Identity Protection PIN, or an IP PIN, is a 6-digit number that prevents someone else from filing a tax return using your Social Security number, your SSN, or an individual taxpayer identification number, or an ITIN. The IP PIN is known only to you and the IRS. The IP PIN helps the IRS to verify your identity when you file your electronic or paper tax return. Even though you may not have a filing requirement, an IP PIN still protects your account from fraudulent filings. Now, an electronically filed return filed without your IPIN or an incorrect IP PIN, an incorrect IP PIN will reject, including your return and any fraudulent returns using your Social Security number. Any paper returns filed without your correct IP PIN will undergo additional scrutiny, and any fraudulent returns will be removed from your account. If the return verifies to be yours, then we will continue to process it. Participation in the IP PIN program is accomplished in two ways: voluntarily or automatically. Anyone with a Social Security number or an individual taxpayer identification number can voluntarily enroll in the IP PIN program. If you're a victim of identity theft related to your federal tax filing, then you are enrolled in the program automatically. Young taxpayers can get an IP PIN before they file their first tax returns. They'll just need a government-issued ID, such as a passport or a driver's license. Important information about your IP PIN once you receive it: an IP PIN is valid for 1 calendar year. A new IP PIN is generated each year for your account. Logging back into your online account will display your current IP PIN, and an IP PIN must be used when filing any federal tax returns during the year, and that includes prior year returns. Taxpayers can voluntarily enroll in the IP PIN program in one of 3 ways. They can use their individual online account, or IOLA. This is the fastest and most secure method to enroll, and you're protected immediately after enrollment. You can enroll by completing a Form 15227, which is an application for an IP PIN. This process can take up to 180 days to complete. Therefore, it's best to enroll online for faster service. Only taxpayers under a certain adjusted gross income can use this method. You can also enroll in person. You can apply at a local taxpayer assistance center or a TAC, and you must make an appointment to visit the TAC. This option is available to taxpayers who cannot verify their identity through the IOLA or by completing a Form 15227. Now, we'll cover each of these options in more detail. As I mentioned on the last slide, the IP PIN application is now part of the individual online account. Once the taxpayer logs into the IOLA, or the individual online account, the IP PIN is located on the profile page. IP PIN is displayed online after enrollment, and it can be retrieved at any time by logging back into the individual online account. Individual online accounts are located at irs.gov/your-account. Taxpayers without an existing individual online account will have to validate their identity through a credentialing service provider. The IP PIN application is generally available starting in mid-January through mid-November. After you log into your individual online account, you can enroll in the IP PIN program from the Profile tab. Click on Profile at the top of the screen, then scroll down to the Identity Protection PIN section. You now have the option to choose from 2 enrollment methods: continuous or one-time enrollment. If you choose continuous enrollment, you remain in the program for the current year and future years. If you choose one-time enrollment, you're enrolled in the program for the current calendar year and will automatically be opted out of the program at the end of the calendar year. If you cannot verify your identity through our online application, you can enroll in the program using Form 15227. You must meet the following conditions to use the form. Your adjusted gross income, or AGI, on your last filed return must be below $84,000 for individuals or $168,000 for married filing joint filers. You must have access to a telephone. The telephone number you provide will be used to call you and validate your identity. Now, once you complete the Form 15227, you can mail, fax, or submit the form digitally to the IRS. A call to validate your identity may take up to 180 days to occur. Once your identity is verified, you'll receive a notice by mail containing your IP PIN within 4 to 6 weeks. You can also enroll in the IP PIN program by setting up an in-person meeting at a local taxpayer assistance center, or TAC. This option is available for those taxpayers who cannot verify their identity online or through the Form 15227 or are ineligible to file Form 15227. Taxpayers can call 844-545-5640 to make an appointment, and appointments may be limited due to availability. You must bring a current government-issued picture ID as well as another identification document. And once your identity is verified, you should receive your IP PIN by mail within 4 to 6 weeks. New IP PINs are generated for the upcoming filing season each December for those who are currently enrolled. A CP01A notice containing the new IP PIN is mailed beginning in mid-December to mid-January and will be mailed to Form 15227 and in-person TAC applicants. Additionally, identity theft victims who did not enroll online after January 2019 and taxpayers who enrolled online prior to January 2019 will also receive a notice. Identity theft victims' addresses are validated through research. If the service cannot validate the address, then the CP01A notice is suppressed. These are the taxpayers who are referenced in the footnote above. Applicants who voluntarily enrolled online after January 2019 must log back into their online account to retrieve their most current IP PIN. They will not receive a CP01A notice. So, how do you use your IP PIN when filing? For an e-filed return, your tax software or practitioner will tell you where to enter the IP PIN. If you can't find where to enter your IP PIN, search within your software for Identity Protection PIN or IP PIN, or contact the software provider's help desk. Each taxpayer claimed on a tax return who receives an IP PIN must have the IP PIN entered on their tax return. This includes the IP PIN of any dependents included on the tax return. If a dependent has an IP PIN, it must be entered on the Form 1040 series, as well as Form 2441 and Schedule Earned Income Tax Credit. For paper returns, you enter your IP PIN as applicable in the boxes marked Identity Protection PIN in the signature area of the tax return. Each taxpayer who has an IP PIN must enter it on their tax return. You don't need to enter an IP PIN for your dependents when filing a paper return. Taxpayers may receive their current year IP PIN by accessing their individual online account, which is the fastest method. These taxpayers retrieve their IP PIN by logging into their account on irs.gov. If the taxpayer does not have an account, they can create an account to retrieve their IP PIN. They can also call the IRS helpline at 1-800-908-4490. The taxpayer will need to verify their identity and current mailing address. After verification is completed, a 4869C notice containing their IP PIN will be mailed to the taxpayer within 21 days. Note, if the taxpayer cannot obtain their IP PIN through either option, then the best alternative is to file a paper return without their IP PIN. Taxpayers who are not confirmed victims of identity theft have the option to opt out of the IP PIN program. The opt-out option is only available through the individual online account. The opt-out button is located on the profile page. A taxpayer will see a message telling them if they're not eligible to opt out. And after the taxpayer selects the opt-out option, if they're eligible, it will take up to 72 hours before the requirement to file with an IP PIN is removed from their account. Okay, so I believe we're due for another polling question.
That is absolutely correct, Jeff. We sure are. So, audience, here is another polling question for you. Take a moment, radio button that best answers the question, true or false. To apply for an IP PIN, a person must be at least age 18. Select A for true or B for false. If you do not receive the polling question, please enter only the letter A or B that corresponds with your response in the Ask Question text box. Your response is timestamped. I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds to make your selection or submit your answer in the Ask Question feature. All right, so we are going to stop the polling now, and let's share the correct answer on the next slide. And the correct response is B, false. And I see that 85% of you responded correctly. So that is great. You all are on a roll. Good job. Krista, I'm going to hand the mic back to you.
Thank you, Anika. So here are a few reminders about your IP PIN. First, an IP PIN protects your federal tax account from identity theft. Secondly, an IP PIN is valid for 1 calendar year. After that, a new IP PIN is generated. Thirdly, an IP PIN must be used when filing any federal tax returns during the year, including prior year returns. In addition, you should remember to always guard your IP PIN. Never share it with anyone other than your tax preparer. If you are unable to enroll online, you can complete a Form 15227 or set up an in-person meeting at a local taxpayer assistance center. Always keep yours and your dependents' addresses current. Should you have a change of address, complete Form 8822, Change of Address. If you encounter issues with your IP PIN when you're filing electronically, ensure that your IP PIN was entered and entered correctly. Please also check that you're not using a prior year IP PIN, as the number does change each year. If you're using a prior year IP PIN, that could result in a rejection of the return. Also ensure that your IP PIN wasn't entered under the wrong taxpayer or dependent. All of these issues will cause the system to reject your return. This concludes the presentation portion of our webinar, but we are now ready for your questions.
Thank you, Krista. So hello again, audience. We have come to our live Q&A. So I am going to be moderating the Q&A session, but before we start, I do want to thank everyone for attending today's presentation. Don't fall for the dirty dozen, tax scams, scam avoidance, and recovery. Now, earlier I mentioned we want to know what questions you have for our presenters. So here is your opportunity. If you haven't input your question, there is still some time. So go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow next to Ask Question field and fill in your question and click Send. Jeff and Krista are staying on to answer questions, your questions. Now, we were supposed to be joined by our colleague, John Crawford. Unfortunately, he couldn't make today's webinar, but our colleague, Glenn Givey, has so graciously agreed to help us out with this Q&A session. So Glenn Gizzy is a senior tax analyst in the Stakeholder Liaison Division of Communication and Liaison. Now, one thing before we start, we may not have time to answer all questions submitted, but we're going to answer as many as time will allow. So let's go ahead and get started so that we can get to as many questions as possible. All right, so I see the first question that I have here is, how can we learn about any new scams that might happen before the next Dirty Dozen list is released? Jeff, can you help us out with that question?
Yes, I can, and that's a great question. What I would recommend, first of all, irs.gov is a great resource. But specifically, what I would recommend doing is signing up for an e-news subscription, which you can do through irs.gov. Any information about emerging scams would be included on the IRS Newswire, or also e-news for tax professionals. So that would be the primary source of information about emerging scams. irs.gov is a great resource, and specifically, I would recommend signing up for an e-news subscription.
Thanks, Jeff. Those are all really great suggestions. So our next question is, beyond sharing scam information with clients and encouraging them to apply for IP pins, is there anything else that tax pros should do? Krista, can you help us out with that one?
I would be happy to, Anika. Thank you. Yes, there is a very important thing that tax pros can do to help discourage scams. They should be sure that their written information security plan, or WISP, is in place and that they're following it. So that is the most important thing, to make sure that your information is protected and you have a plan to follow.
Thank you, Krista. That is great advice there. All right, so the next question we have from the audience is, can you explain again how we send suspected scams and schemes? Like, how do we forward that information to the IRS? Jeff, can you help us with that one?
Sure, Anika. Yeah, so the best place again to start would be irs.gov. Where you're going to find information on how to report various tax scams would be irs.gov/scams. So for example, and this information will all be included on that page, but for example, phishing scams, that's phishing with a PH, which we talked about earlier. Those would be forwarded to an email address, which is phishing, again, with a PH at irs.gov. There's also instructions on how to report mail-related scams to the Postal Service, the U.S. Postal Service, and also the Federal Trade Commission or the FTC. There's links to both of those websites on that page. You'll also find a link to Form 14242, which Krista talked about earlier. That is the form that you would use to report suspected abusive tax promotions or preparers. And that can be submitted either online, by mail, or by fax. So all of those different methods for reporting different types of scams, the process for doing that is available at irs.gov/scams. Also, you can always contact your stakeholder liaison if you see a scam that you think may be part of a larger trend.
Thanks, Jeff. So a lot of great information that you shared there. Hopefully the audience was able to take note of everything. All right, so the next question that we have is, how does the IRS become aware of new scams? Krista, can you help us with that one?
Absolutely. So at the IRS, we monitor news reports and social media, but you are one of the most important sources. By submitting information using the steps that we have on irs.gov/scams and your stakeholder liaison, if you see a scam or scheme that may be part of a larger trend, you can help us identify new scams and schemes early.
Thanks, Krista. All right, I see that the next question we have is, where did the images in the presentation come from? Jeff, can you help us out?
Yes, yeah, all of the images, or the majority of the images in the presentation, were taken from the IRS's social media accounts. And the IRS does have a social media presence on all of the major platforms, including Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. You can, if you're interested in following any of those accounts, you can go to the IRS website and search for social media, or go to irs.gov/social media, and it'll summarize all of the different platforms that the IRS has accounts on. But yeah, all of the images, or most of the images in the presentation, were taken from the IRS's social media account.
Thanks, Jeff. Audience, when you all have time, make sure you visit the social media page on irs.gov and give us a follow. We'll share a lot of great news there. All right, so the next question. What should I do if a client is convinced that they're entitled to one of the tax benefits listed in your scans? Krista, can you help us with that one?
I sure can. What we recommend is that you would point them to official IRS resources showing the facts about these types of scams. If your client insists on claiming tax benefit for which they don't qualify, you should refuse to prepare their tax return, because you would be liable as well for any type of fraudulent return filing.
Awesome. Thank you for that information there. All right, so the next question I see is, shouldn't everyone have an IP PIN? That's a great question. Jeff, can you help us with that one?
Sure. Yeah, and that is a great question, especially after the presentation. Based on what we covered today, I would recommend it, and I would recommend for the tax pros that you encourage your clients to get one. And yeah, the best way to get an IP PIN, if you don't already have one, is to sign up online. If you can't sign up online through the individual online account, as we covered, there's a form that you can submit. You can also do it in person. But if you're able to do it online, you can get that IP PIN immediately, and you can check on it by logging into your online account. And there's also other good reasons to get an individual online account. So yeah, the short answer to that question, I think everyone should have an IP PIN, and for most people, it's very easy to get through an individual online account.
Thanks, Jeff. It looks like the next question that we have is related to phishing. So the question is, if we know an SMS or text is a scam, how do we send it to phishing@irs.gov? Jeff, I'm gonna circle back to you. Can you help us out with this one?
Yeah, sure. I can help on that as well. So what you'll want to do is essentially you'll want to make a copy of that text and email it to the IRS at phishing@irs.gov. And there's some other information that you'll want to include in the email if you can, which I'll cover. So in order to make a copy of a text, essentially and it can be difficult to describe it without showing it, but essentially you want to press and hold the text message and then select copy. And then you'll want to create a new email, which you're going to send to phishing@irs.gov. That's phishing with a PH. And you'll copy that text into the body of the email. Other things that you'll want to include in the email, if you can, is the phone number that the text came from. So you'll want to put that into the email as well. And if you can, you'll want to also include the date, time, and time zone that the text came in. And then you will send that email to phishing@irs.gov. So essentially, you'll want to make a copy of the body of the text itself by clicking on the text, and then you'll want to include some other information, including the time that it was sent, the day that it was sent, the time zone that you're in, and if you have the information, which you should, the telephone number that the text came from.
Jeff, thank you so much for that detailed explanation there. So as Jeff, Jeff just covered how to report a text message scam. Our next question involves how do we send an email scam to phishing at irs.gov? So if we know that an email is a scam, how do we send it to phishing at irs.gov? Krista, can you help me with that one?
Sure thing. The first thing you want to do is go to the irs.gov website, and you'll notice at the top of that top right-hand corner of the web page, there is a search box. And in that search box, you'll want to put the words report phishing. And again, that's phishing with a PH. We can't emphasize that enough. And the first link that's going to come up when you do that will say report phishing. So if you click on that link, you'll be brought to the page Report Phishing and Online Scams on irs.gov. The second question on that page, which is called What to Do If You Receive a Suspicious IRS-Related Email, you'll want to click the plus sign to expand the section and then follow the directions. One of the best ways is to save the email as a file and then send the file to phishing@irs.gov. Saving the email is going to preserve the email headers, which really helps us to locate where that scam came from.
Thank you so much, Krista, for that information that you've shared there. So the next question we have is, do the people behind these scams ever get caught? I think that's a really great question. Jeff, can you help me out with that one?
Sure, and yes, they do. So recently, earlier this year, several individuals were arrested, and they were conducting spear phishing scams, specifically targeting tax professionals. There's more information about the arrest on the Department of Justice's website. That's www.justice.gov. And there, as other individuals do get caught and arrested and prosecuted, there'll be information on the Department of Justice's website, which is justice.gov. But yes, they do, and that would be the best place to look for information on that topic.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so it looks like our next question, do people still call pretending to be the IRS and ask for gift cards? Chris, I'll let you take care of that one for us.
Okay. Actually, we aren't seeing this so much anymore. IRS hasn't observed the IRS telephone scam in volume since before the pandemic. For tax-related calls, you should visit the Report Phishing and Online Scams page, and there's a question there called What to Do If You Receive a Suspicious IRS-Related Telephone Call. This provides a wealth of information on what to do. And please know that threat actors will compromise your email accounts, and then they'll use the email account, which could be a friend or family member, to request gift cards. You can report IRS impersonation to phishing@irs.gov and to the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, or TIGTA. And I just want to mention that recently we've been told that some scammers are even sending phony IRS notices out. So please be aware of that as well. And we do want to hear about that.
Thank you so much, Krista. Jeff and Krista, you guys have helped us out with so many questions. I am going to tag Glenn in here for this next question. So, Glenn, under what conditions are taxpayers given IP pins who didn't request them?
Thank you. So yes, there's a couple of different times that a taxpayer may receive an IP pin. The major one for Internal Revenue Service is if the taxpayer is found to be the victim of refund fraud. If we realize and find that their Social Security number has been used, based on the information also that the taxpayer provides us, we may enroll them in the IP PIN program. That is the usual, or I should say number one reason that the IRS would give somebody an IP PIN.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank
And you know what? I have I have a follow-up IP PIN question for you. So is there a cost associated with the IP PIN?
No, there is no cost. Anytime you go on to irs.gov, unless it is something very specific, like requesting some type of letter ruling, there is no cost to get an IP PIN. So if anybody is advertising that an IP PIN is only $99.99, that's not true. The taxpayer can go to irs.gov, put in the letters IP PIN in the search box, and they can apply through the IRS using ID.me, which one of the questions asked was, is that a scam? No, ID.me is not a scam. It is the third-party contractor that the IRS and many other government agencies and corporate agencies use to do verification process for the taxpayer. There is no cost to the taxpayer for that because that cost is borne by whatever agency contracts them. So there is no cost for a taxpayer to get an IP PIN. IPPIN.
Thanks, Glenn. Jeff, I'm going to actually circle back to you because we just got a really good question in regard to EINs. So what about those sites that offer to set up an EIN for a modest fee? What can you tell us about those?
Yeah, that's a good question and good to repeat this information because these sites are not affiliated with the IRS. And as Glenn had mentioned, you can get an EIN for free directly from the IRS's website. The Federal Trade Commission actually recently issued letters of warning to some of the operators of the sites that charge for EINs and claim affiliation with the IRS. And there's more information about that on the Federal Trade Commission or FTC's website. So the main thing to keep in mind is that these services are not affiliated with the IRS. If you need an EIN, you can get an EIN directly from the IRS for free, and you can get that EIN immediately in most cases.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Glenn, I have another question for you. So how do we know when we get a call that is from the IRS or if it's a scam?
Okay, so we get that a lot here in Stakeholder Liaison. So basically, if you're not certain whether the number that has called you and the message they have left is legitimate, first thing is, did you contact the IRS recently by phone or by mail asking for information? If you did and you think this may be the person that called you back, you can always contact the IRS at its toll-free number, 1-800-829-1040, to find out if that number is correct. If you are a tax professional, then you can also contact your local stakeholder liaison, which we got a lot of questions about during this presentation. You go to irs.gov, type in stakeholder liaison, and scroll down, and you will see contact your local stakeholder liaison. You click on that, and it gives you the email address, depending on what state you're in, of that particular area, and you contact them and you tell them, hey, this is the person's name and phone number that said they're from IRS. Can you check on that for us? And we can do that for you. We can check to see. And we had somebody do that during this call who received a phone call with the number, and we checked, and we wrote back that it is the correct number. So now they can contact the IRS back. But always be wary. Never immediately say, well, what's my Social Security number? Don't bait the potential scammer. Just if you don't recognize the number, let it go to voicemail and listen to the message. This is what I tell every community group that I speak with, especially senior citizen groups. You don't recognize the number, don't answer it. Let them leave a message and take it from there. But we can always check for you.
Thanks, Glenn. That is a really great response. So I have another question for you related to the IP PIN. So do we need to use the IP PIN for amended returns as well?
So the IP PIN is the PIN you use for any federal tax return you're filing between January 1st and December 31st. So even if you're filing a prior year return that you never got to, or you're filing an amended return, you would want to put the IP PIN on there, because then that verifies to the IRS that you are the legitimate taxpayer. That's the whole purpose to the IP PIN. It is to cut down on refund fraud. And, you know, we can't give an exact number, but we can tell you that it's extremely high percentage in the 90s that the IRS is stopping refund fraud. And the IP PIN is the easiest way for most taxpayers to prevent refund fraud by having that PIN. And yes, that PIN changes every year, which is to security reasons, so this way the scammers can't use it the following year. And it protects you and your return. We can get 100 returns on from Jeff's Social Security number, but without an IP PIN, they won't process, and then Jeff can file confidently with his IP PIN, and his return will go through. And I should say that I added that in because I noticed somebody asked the question if Jeff had an IP PIN. And Jeff, I don't know if you do, but I have an IP PIN, and the process was relatively quick and easy to get one. And I recommend that every taxpayer, as you've said before, Jeff and Krista, everybody should have an IP PIN. It would cut down on fraud tremendously if everybody did that. Thank you.
Glenn, I second that. Everyone absolutely should have an IP PIN. Well, audience, it looks like that is all the time that we have for questions, but I do want to thank our Q&A team for answering your questions and for sharing their knowledge and expertise. But we do not want to leave without our final polling question. So, audience, our last polling question is an attendance check. So please select the radio button on the screen. If you don't receive the polling question, add only the letter A as a response in the Ask Question text box to timestamp your response. Audience, please remember that you need to answer at least 3 polling questions and participate in the live broadcast from the official start time for at least 50 minutes to earn IRS CE credit. The polling question example we did at the beginning of this presentation does count toward, it does count toward this requirement. I'll give you a few more seconds to select the radio button or submit the Ask Question feature. All right, so we are going to stop polling now, and thank you for responding and participating with the polling question. Now, before we close out today's session, Jeff, can you start us off with some key points that you want the attendees to remember from today's webinar?
Sure, yeah. So the key takeaways that we covered today are that taxpayers should stay aware of tax-related scams so that they don't become victims, that they should report abusive tax schemes to the IRS. If a taxpayer becomes a victim of a scam, they should follow steps to avoid further loss. And the taxpayers should enroll in the IP PIN program. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and I'll hand it back to you, Anika.
Thank you so much to Jeff, Krista, and Glenn. So, audience, we are planning webinars throughout the year, and to register for upcoming webinars, you just need to visit irs.gov, do a keyword search for webinars, and select the webinars for tax practitioners or webinars for small businesses. When appropriate, we will offer certificates and CE credit for upcoming webinars. We invite you all to visit the IRS YouTube page at www.youtube.com/IRS videos. There you can view available recorded versions of our webinars and other key video messaging once posted. Again, continuing education credit or certificates of completion are not offered if you view any archived version of any of our webinars. So another big thank you to our presenters for a great webinar. I also want to thank you, our attendees, for attending today's webinar, Don't Fall for the Dirty Dozen Tax Scams, Scam Avoidance and Recovery. Again, if you attended today's webinar for at least 50 minutes after the official start time and answered at least 3 polling questions during the live broadcast, you'll receive a certificate of completion for 1 IRS CE credit. And remember, the polling question example will count towards the 3 minimum question response requirement. Audience, it is important for you to know that certificates of completion will be emailed to the registration email address of qualifying participants as a PDF attachment. The email will come from the email address seen on this slide, cl.sl.web.conference.team@irs.gov. Please add this email address to your contacts to ensure you receive the email with the certificate attached. If you qualified for IRS continuing education credit for this webinar and registered with your valid first name, last name, and PTIN as it appears on your IRS PTIN account, your CE credit will be posted in your IRS PTIN account. If you are eligible for continuing education from the California Tax Education Council, your credit will be posted to your CTEC account as well. If you qualify and have not received your certificate and/or credit by July 10th, please email us at cl.sl.web.conference.team@irs.gov. The email address is shown on this slide. If you're interested in finding out who your local stakeholder liaison is, send us an email using the address shown on the slide and we'll send you that information. We would appreciate it if you take a few minutes to complete a short evaluation before you exit. If you'd like to have more sessions like this one, let us know. If you have thoughts on how we can make them better, please let us know that as well. If you have any requests for future webinar topics or pertinent information you'd like to see in an IRS fact sheet, tax tip, or FAQ on irs.gov, then please include your suggestions in the comments section of the survey. Click the survey button on the right side of your screen to begin. If it doesn't come up, make sure you have disabled your pop-up blockers. It's been a pleasure to be here with you, and on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service and our presenters, we would like to thank you for attending today's webinar. It's important for the IRS to stay connected with the tax professional community, individual taxpayers, industry associations, along with federal, state, and local government organizations. You all make our job a lot easier by sharing the information that allows for proper tax reporting. So thank you again for your time and attendance. We hope you found the information helpful, and you may exit the webinar at this time.